What is up, Twitter thugs, social media reprobates, and gamers in general? I'm Fox, you're watching PlayStation News Now, your source of news, rumour, video game discussion, and of course our weekly The Gamer Couch podcast. Now you can keep up to date by following the channel via Twitter, Fox at PS News Now, as seen in the bottom right of your screen. In today's video, really from an article sourced courtesy of GameSpot.com, PSX 2016 is a little over 2 months away. That's the PlayStation Experience, and PlayStation News Now will definitely be doing something closer to the run-up, although some news has already surfaced in regards to what the fans might expect from the event. So the PlayStation Pro is coming to Anahiem, California as part of the PlayStation Experience 2016, the annual convention that celebrates all things PlayStation. The upgraded console will be hooked up to a 4K HDR enabled TV or TVs. I assume there'll be dozens of them for your viewing and hands-on pleasure for the entire duration of the show, which runs December 3rd to December 4th. Now the PlayStation Pro launches on November 10, so it'll actually be available for nearly a whole month before PlayStation Experience 2016 lands. Still, considering you need a 4K TV to get the full benefit of the system, it would be wise for the undecided gamer to get tickets to attend the event if possible, so they can see Pro in action firsthand, as YouTube footage does not do PlayStation 4 Pro visuals justice. Even if you have zero interest in PlayStation 4 Pro at this point, PlayStation Experience is a great event for PlayStation fans. In 2014, looking back, the convention gave us our first look at Uncharted 4 gameplay, plus announcements of Drawn to Death and what remains of Edith Finch. And in 2015, it was revealed that Neo will be coming to the West, and we learned of Ni no Kuni 2, among other many reveals. In another article sourced for the purposes of today's video, the link is in this video's description. Now, I think the narrative currently floating around the internet regarding full-fat 4K native 60 frames per second on console is highly disingenuous. It started with Microsoft's shocking Project Scorpio E3 reveal earlier this year, and the baton has been passed to the Xbox community, who now seem to be running with it to the finish line. Unfortunately, as is the case with these things, many people are going to be severely disappointed. So what am I talking about? Well, a question was posed to a development studio named Milestone, currently working on a number of Xbox projects, one of which is Ride 2, that motorcycle game. When asked in a recent interview, should Xbox Scorpio's power be used for 4K/30 frames per second or 1080p/60 frames per second, the answer was certainly interesting and quite telling in what was realistically achievable on Xbox Scorpio hardware. So Microsoft are intent on pushing 4K gaming with their upcoming console, the Xbox One Scorpio, which is scheduled to launch holiday 2017. Microsoft have stated that they are not going to set any mandate on how developers will use Scorpio's power. The Scorpio is a 4K ready machine, but in the end it's up to developers on how they want to use it. So the lead designer of Ride 2 over at Milestone Games seems undecided on whether to push for 1080p 60 or 4K 30 on Microsoft's Xbox Scorpio console, stating that it depends on players' feedback and what works best in their perspective. Strange, isn't it, that we're starting to get more narrative around the 4K 30 and not the 4K 60 that we were promised. Anyway, the dev also went on to say hitting the 60 frame per second mark is more difficult, so it will be a better option to play with resolution instead. Here's a quote: "Hitting the 60 FPS mark flawlessly is probably more challenging, and there might be an option for resolutions in between HD and 4K. Lots of new options to explore." End of quote. So now Scorpio is starting to sound a lot less like Uncompromised and a lot more like a 6T-flop, slightly faster PlayStation 4 Pro, isn't it? So Ride 2's engine renders the game at 1080p on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, but at a 30 frame per second cap. So in that perspective, the developers of Ride 2 may opt for better resolution over frame rate if and when they develop for the Xbox One Scorpio. Personally speaking, I would like third-party developers to target 1080p and 60 FPS with all visual settings maxed out on Scorpio and indeed on PS4 Pro, but at the same time I would also like for first-party developers to run their games at 4K and 60 frames per second when and where possible. Now, Forza Motorsport 7 running at 4K 60 FPS on Scorpio could be something special, but we need to temper our expectations in regards to what is truly achievable on a 6T-flop console. You won't be seeing many 4K 60 games on Scorpio outside of Microsoft Studios' own offerings, especially given the slight hint from Phil Spencer and Team Xbox, who seem to be veering away from the whole 4K 60 uncompromised to, well, we will still, meaning Microsoft, push for 4K 60 with existing Xbox One game engines that already run at 1080p 60 frames, but we'll be looking at running those games in native 4K. So, reading between the lines, it seems Spencer is alluding to the display being 4K native and not the actual game assets, since rendering existing Xbox One game assets will require those games' visuals to be built from the ground up. So Microsoft are up-resing 1080p 60 FPS games to native 4K, and if the very pretty PS4 Pro version of Rise of the Tomb Raider is anything to go by, we'll likely see Scorpio games displaying the same muddy textures that existed in existing Xbox One games, just at higher resolution. This is a far cry from that initial E3 2016 promise of 4K 60 FPS uncompromised. In truth, 6T flops is simply not enough to deliver Microsoft's lofty, uncompromised ambitions. Of course, you'll definitely see full-fat 4K 60 games on the Scorpio and indeed on PS4 Pro, but these games are likely to be less graphically intensive games than compared to the likes of something like, say, The Witcher 3 or Batman Arkham Knight as examples. Switching to PS4 Pro briefly, PlayStation 4 architect Mark Cerny has confirmed the GPU found in Pro is based on Polaris technology, but indicated Sony have re-engineered the GPU, adding key features, and the RX 480 based GPU even has technologies that go beyond Polaris. Although Sony was reluctant to be drawn on the details, he did promise to reveal more about PS4 Pro's GPU in the coming months. It will certainly be interesting to learn more about the enhancements Sony have made to that GPU. Unlike the Xbox One, this could be PS4 Pro's very own secret sauce. I'm confident that Microsoft can and will provide 4K/60 gaming, much like Halo 5 and Forza 6, the only key games that have a single player component running at 60 frames per second on the Xbox One, albeit with massive visual compromise such as a dynamic resolution that drops below 1080p whenever the system comes under heavy load. However, don't expect scores of 4K 60 games on Scorpio or on PS4 Pro, as these games will be far and few in between, and in Microsoft's case, 4K 60 will mostly come from their own internal studios when and where possible. Just don't expect a whole bunch of big third-party studios making AAA games to even attempt hitting true 4K 60 FPS games on Project Scorpio. And that there brings us to the end of another video. If you enjoyed the content, go ahead and hit the like button. Thanks to all those who kindly share our videos, helping us to reach more PlayStation fans and gamers in general. And of course, subscribe for more news, rumor, and always video game discussion. Until next time, play games, not corporations. Thanks for watching, everybody.